What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. If you guys are hanging out with me for the first time, do your boy a favor, go ahead and drop a quick like for the video and also subscribe to the channel. I would totally appreciate it. Well, guys, the Federal Reserve has just released the latest update for the American people, and it looks like the Federal Reserve has decided not to raise interest rates for June of 2023. So now, we've already seen some mixed reactions in the stock market on this news. So not really sure if the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones are actually going to shoot up from here or what. But me personally, I do think that we're probably due for a little bit of a rally, hopefully going into the latter half of 2023. So that's my little market prediction. We'll see what happens. But the housing market, it's still feeling the effects of the Fed's decision, and this is having a direct impact on the cost of living. Americans are literally getting destroyed and decimated with ever increasing costs for food, housing, to borrow money. Credit card interest rates are headed higher. So this is what $35 gets you at the grocery store.
3 items.
3 items. Is that a good value? But remarkably, the stock market has actually been holding up pretty well. I don't know how many of you guys actually check your 401ks on a regular basis, but the stock market's actually held up pretty well. I mean, in spite of all of these different Fed interest rate hikes, and on top of that, you know, the reduced demand for mortgage applications showing signs of weakness in the housing market. The housing market has actually been pretty resilient, and so has the stock market. The stock market's within about 6 or 7% of all-time highs. But think about it, guys. CPI numbers came out, and we're still hovering in the neighborhood of 4 or 5% CPI. You know, for inflation. New Zealand actually just came out today and reported that they're now in a recession. So the question is the United States going to be in a recession? Or maybe we're already in a recession and it has yet to be officialized or reported. But the Fed deciding not to raise interest rates for June 2023, but they also did say, the Fed did say that we should likely expect 2 additional rate hikes going into the latter half of this year, 2023. So basically the Fed economists, they understand that whenever the Fed makes a decision, whenever the Fed decides to raise or reduce interest rates, it's got quite a bit of a delayed effect. And we've already seen well over 10 interest rate hikes from the Fed in the last 18 months. So, you know, with multiple banks failing, I think the Fed is saying, hey, let's just see, let's allow the true effect to be exposed in terms of the interest rate hikes that they've inflicted on the market so far. Meanwhile, cost of living steadily headed higher. Why? Because even though inflation, the rate of inflation is headed down, it's not negative. So instead of prices increasing by like 9% at one point, like it was doing before, it's probably much more than 9%, but you know what I mean? Like CPI inflation was at 9%. Now with CPI inflation around 4 and 5%, yes, CPI inflation is lower, but that just means that the price of increase, the cost of goods, the cost of services, the cost of real estate, assets, products and services, they're still increasing. They're just not increasing as aggressively as they were before. So the cost of living is still a problem, and it's not going away anytime soon. And bottom line is the Fed's target's 2%. They're not targeting negative figures in terms of inflation. So prices are likely always to continue to go up, which is why I'm a huge proponent of encouraging people to always look to increase their income, invest in assets that increase in value over time, ideally dividend producing assets, to help to generate passive income streams. I like ETFs and index funds, you know, Vanguard, VOO, SCHD ETFs that pay dividends. because that is the only way to, it's not the only way. It's one of the ways to get out of this mess, to have investments and assets that pay you, even if you're not necessarily trading your time for money. Now, let's talk about this housing market though, right? Like, even though interest rates are borderline 7%, the housing market's still been pretty freaking resilient. I'm seeing houses still going up on the market, and they're going under contract, and they're still closing. Now, the housing market's not booming like it once was, but we were, looking at properties in Florida, and I actually saw a property literally just sell that we were looking at for the last 4 months. Between us and the seller, we couldn't come to an agreement on the price, but we really liked the place. Long and short of it, it ended up selling for about $100,000 more than what we were willing to pay for it. But the seller still sold the property for $375,000 less than their asking price. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe the seller, and this property was in Florida, on the Gulf, overlooking the water, beautiful property. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, the seller took a bath. I mean, he lost $375,000. You might be thinking, well, this particular seller of this condo did not take a loss at all. I did my homework and I saw that this seller had paid roughly $550,000 less than what they sold it for. So they still made about $600,000 in profit on this property. So they're doing just fine. Now, the Florida housing market, it's been making headlines, and it's probably going to remain in the headlines for quite some time, between Ron DeSantis and his shenanigans and this whole new immigration law that's affecting the labor taking place in Florida. I don't know if you guys had seen some of the grocery stores inside of Florida, like some of the shelves for water were kind of bare. It's a lot better here in the state of Georgia, but some of these stores are not getting the deliveries that they were expecting, because a lot of people are basically going on strike in terms of making deliveries in Florida. But that's a whole nother story. But basically, the housing market in Florida has been making headlines as loads of people are basically packing their bags and trying to move south, even still. And a lot of people are moving down there from Michigan, from New York, from California, lots of different states. I mean, as high as Florida housing market prices are now, it's still a huge discount compared to the cost of living in California. So even at Florida's peak of real estate prices, it's still a huge savings for anyone who's living in California for the most part, especially if you're living in areas like San Francisco or Los Angeles. But basically, Florida has led the country in total migrations. People moving there from other states. Tons of benefits of living in Florida, including no state income taxes. That's huge. I mean, depending upon what state you live in. I mean, especially if you live in California. First of all, property taxes are super high in California. State income taxes are super high in California. But if you move to Florida, number one, you don't have to worry about earthquakes. You don't have to worry about state income taxes. And your property taxes are likely a lot less expensive in Florida, even if nothing more than the fact that the property's average value in Florida are significantly less than they are in California. So it would reasonably make sense that your property taxes would be much lower. Now, I'm not really sure about the rate, the millage rate of the property taxes in California versus Florida, but net, you're going to save money. If you live in California and you're moving to Florida, you're going to save some significant amounts of money. And even if you didn't get a raise, you kind of got a raise just because your cost of living went down so much. But for most people, the cost of living in Florida has gone up quite a bit, especially if you've been living in Florida for a long time. Now, of course, the states, Florida's weather, and relatively low cost of living makes it fairly attractive for a lot of retirees. You find, old folks moving down there, but it's also a great spot for people who are still working in their prime years. Can you imagine working your 9-to-5 job And at the end of the day, maybe you and your wife, you and your husband, your significant other, whatever, get together after work and just say, hey, let's go for a walk on the beach. Like, that's pretty cool. Go for just an evening walk, chill on the beach, read a book. You can't do that in all parts of the United States. So that's a tremendous luxury that Florida does offer. But obviously the state's pretty appealing to live in. Buying or selling a house in Florida in 2023 looks a lot different than it did a couple years ago. And this is part of why we ended up not buying that property that we saw, that we really fell in love with, but the numbers just didn't work. I mean, you got mortgage rates that are significantly higher, HOA fees are so much higher, insurance costs are so much higher. The real estate market in Florida, I don't care if it's Miami, Destin, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Orlando, Daytona Beach, you name it, Fort Lauderdale, real estate is just not as attractive as it once was in Florida. Now, obviously, people are still buying there, so it's not like it's totally turned everyone off. But when you look at these unexpected costs that are ever increasing, like some people I've talked to a lot of people. I'm talking to real estate agents, I'm talking to homeowners in the state of Florida. They're seeing insurance going up 2 times, 3 times. That's, to have your insurance policy go up by 200%, 300%, a lot of people can't afford that. To see your property taxes, to see your homeowners, to see your HOAs increase by double or triple, a lot of people can't afford that. And these are people who didn't necessarily even file any insurance claims. They're seeing these kind of increases. Now, Florida's a big place. It's more than 65,000 square miles. Like, that's a pretty big state. Now, just to get a sense of, the pulse of the buying and selling activity across Florida, it really is important to remember that real estate is super local. Like, Orlando real estate market could be booming, but Panama City's real estate market might have died down. Like, it really just depends on where you are, and it's just very, very local. Now, what we've seen in Miami is like lots of wealthy people, international buyers, international investors, out-of-staters. They basically relocated to Miami, or they purchased or invested in real estate in Miami. And that's a lot different than that's a lot different activity going on in Miami compared to, say, Tallahassee, right? So, while one of the best places to live in Florida, it's gonna likely include access to the beach. They also include inherent downsides. Obviously, when you have natural disasters like hurricanes, tropical storms, Hurricane Ian, we've seen the horrible damage that was caused by Hurricane Ian, like just decimating the Gulf Coast, Fort Myers, Clearwater, like a lot of those areas just got destroyed. But this is the risk that you take. It's like, it's beautiful when it's beautiful, right? Like, when the weather is beautiful, it's a wonderful place, but it's a very scary place to be when these storms come through. And what you gonna do, right? Unless you got the money to leave town for a couple of weeks, or at least a week, let the storm pass through, and then move back. But who can afford to do that? If you're a family of 3 or 4 or 5, are you really going to be able to afford to pack your family up and take an unexpected trip to a state that's far enough away out of the storm's path to avoid the storm, and then hopefully come back to a house that's still standing, right? These are some serious downsides to Florida. And with that comes higher insurance rates. With that drives up the cost of living, because, okay, whether you're a homeowner or you're a renter, these insurance rates are going up across the board. So if you own your home, your insurance policy, your homeowner's insurance policy is going up. If you're renting your home, the landlord's homeowner's insurance policy is going up, and so that means your rent payment is going to be going up, right? There's no escaping it. Now, Florida's median sale price in April of 2023 is roughly $410,000. Now, this is roughly the same figure as 2022, but back in April of 2022, buyers were typically paying roughly the full ask price on homes that are listed for sale. But this year is a little bit different. Now, this is likely due to the Fed raising interest rates, mortgage rates being much more expensive, much higher now, making mortgage payments much higher. Sellers have had to have a little bit of give on that price if they want to sell their house quickly. Now, it also depends on how well you priced your house to begin with, so that's also a factor. Some sellers are trying to gouge people and sell their house for super duper top dollar and just kind of like really bend the buyer over. But with these higher interest rates and the way that the housing market has been going, sellers don't have that kind of power anymore. The sellers are still in control, in my opinion, but they just don't have that kind of power that they once had. Now, the median time for contract for single family home, it used to be like 31 days. Actually, it was 31 days in April, but this is actually significantly longer than it was like a year ago. A year ago, you'd list a property and you'd have 10, 15, 25 buyers lining up at your open house. And within 8 days, you'd have that property under contract at the longest. A lot of Florida buyers, they didn't need to secure financing for the deal. Out of the 20-something thousand family homes that were sold in April, about 7,000 of them were purchased in cash. Now, in those cases, the buyers didn't care what the interest rates were. They paid cash for the house. But now it's kind of like it's even more so. It's like, okay, interest rates are so much higher now, and smart buyers that are looking to pay cash for these properties, they realize that buyers' mortgage payments are going to be so much higher. So they're leveraging this when they're creating their offers. So this is and it's funny because I've actually talked to sellers or buyers that have actually paid cash for properties. Sometimes they're using their cash to buy the property at a great deal, at a great discount. But a month later, they're refinancing the property to get their cash back out. Now, they may not do 100% refi. They might do 90%, 80% refi, whatever, avoiding PMI and stuff like that. But these are some strategies that some real estate investors are doing to get some of the best deals in this real estate market right now. But, drop me some comments, guys. Let me know what you guys are seeing out there, boots on the ground. Let me know what you guys are seeing in the market. Are you seeing rents changing? Are they getting more expensive, less expensive? Are they are homes moving quickly in your area, and are they getting more than ask price, or are you seeing deals where people are taking less than the original ask price for the home? Drop me some comments, guys. If you're new to the channel, please, again, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, drop a like for the video. I really appreciate that. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I'm going to chat with you guys on the next one. Y'all be safe.